What's up YouTube? Welcome back to Yugimetrics, Winning Yu-Gi-Oh! With Math. You are currently watching part 2, which is a focus on pod duality. If you haven't watched the first video in the series, please be sure to look at my channel and check that out. I'm going to try and have it in a playlist too, so you'll be able to get easily from there to here. But the stuff I talk about does carry over from what I talked about last time, so be sure to watch the first video before you're watching this one. And as always, it's hosted by the Upstart Goblin, and that is me. So in this video, we're going to be talking about pod duality. For those of you unfamiliar with pod duality, it is a normal spell card, and the most recent text reads, excavate the top 3 cards of your deck, add one of them to your hand, also after that, shuffle the rest back into your deck. You can only activate one pod duality per turn, and you cannot special summon during the turn you activate this card. So when we think about this card, and I remember when this card first came out, it was Duelist Revolution, it was a secret. I remember buying one of these for $100 cash. And the card was just too good. It really helped the consistency out of the slower decks in a slower format, but recently play of it's kind of fallen off in favor of the faster decks that can speed through everything. So those of you who watched my last video will know about this already, but we talked about the Hypergeometric Distribution, which is a way of calculating how consistent your deck is at doing a certain task. So we use this formula, the KCX times D minus K, CH minus X, over DCH, where the variables are the 4 defined on the left hand side, and this will give you a number between 0 and 1 that will show you the percentage of the time that you will be completing the task, in this case getting a card in your opening hand. Now just so we don't have to do this anymore, I've put a link here to the calculator, a hypergeometric calculator that will help you with working through these kind of problems. I didn't want to put it in the last video because I wanted to demonstrate how you actually do the problems and how it works before giving you the easy way out. Yeah, sorry about that guys, I'm trying to show how to do this, not just here's a calculator, have fun. I know, I sound like a horrible math teacher, meh, whatever. So looking at this from a statistical standpoint, let's look at what pod duality is actually going to do to this formula. So what it's going to do is going to increase the H value, which before we were referring to as the hand, but in this case it's more going to apply to the number of cards that you're seeing on your first turn. So duality lets you see an additional 3 cards if you draw it in your starting hand, which will make that H value go up to 8 if you're going first and there's no other factors. So what this will do for you, this will up your consistency at the cost of your special summon for the turn. Now, a lot of decks can handle this really well and some can't. For instance, I would not play a pot of duality in a deck like Infernity that's built on winning in that one turn. It all depends on what deck you're using. We'll talk more about that later. But let's take a look at how this is going to work. So when I did the probability for duality, I did what's called a probability tree. What I did, I took all possible outcomes that are directly affected of what we're talking about. So I took a look at Clifforts. Clifforts are a really popular deck right now. They keep growing in popularity, and the deck is really consistent. So I wanted to see how it's going to work with people playing Pot of Duality in it, because it's kind of iffy as to whether people are playing it or not. So again, this formula can only work on a single linear goal. Well, that's hard to say. So I set my goal to resolve Cliffort Scout's effect on turn 1. Now I'm saying resolve because I don't want to be including Odd Eye's Pendulum Dragon in here, because that won't give you the Cliffort Scout resolution on your first turn. So when I did the probability tree, you have to think of all the different ways that you can reach your goal. So I'm going to add the probability of opening Scout in my opening hand to the probability of opening Duality but not Scout and finding the Scout with Duality. So putting that in perspective, in your opening 5 cards in your hand, you do not get a Cliffort Scout, but you do get a Pot of Duality, and one of those top 3 cards is Cliffort Scout, which in that case it would be a pretty obvious take. I'm neglecting some plays that don't exactly help progress your game state, but can still potentially get you Scout, because MSTing your own sacrifice on turn 1 is really just not that bright, and nor is, well, I mean, you could make a disc, I guess, but that requires 5 cards, so the probability is just incredibly low of that to start with. So for an example list, I took a look at Enrique Fraustro, I hope I'm saying that right, Clifford deck that he used. This link right here, tinyurl.com/upstart will take you right to it. I will also put an annotation in that will link you to the deck. The main deck has 41 cards in it, and the relevant cards that we're looking at for consistency's sake, he ran 3 Upstart Goblin, 3 Cliffort Scout, 3 Summoner's Art, and 2 Pot of Duality. So before we get into the duality part of it, let's take a look at just the consistency of turn 1 Scout. His deck was 38 cards, and I know I said 41. I'm assuming that Upstart Goblin is reducing the deck size by 1 for every copy of it. And there is a guy who did a proof on this. He did mathematically prove that Upstart Goblin actually is like playing fewer cards in your deck. I will put annotations with links to that video right here in the video. You can take a look at that. It's awesome. I believe his name is Someone from the Dark. I may be wrong on that. I'm not looking at it right now. You can see his channel. I'll link to the video. It's an awesome video. Please watch it if you're interested in this stuff. So H is still going to be 5 since we're going to open with 5 cards. And I'm setting K as 6. K is usually the number of the certain goal that you're trying to achieve. But with 3 Cliffort Scout and 3 Summoner Art, anytime you have Summoner's Art, you're going to get your Cliffort Scout on first turn. So where K is going to be 6. And the X is going to be greater than or equal to 1. So we want at least 1 copy of Cliffort Scout. And when I do that, I plug it into that calculator we just had before a couple slides ago. I find that the chance of having 1 plus Scout in your opening hand is 0.599, which is very, very good consistency. And again, that's the formula we used. So applying duality, like I said in the probability tree, we need to find a way that we can get Scout with duality. And it doesn't matter if we get a Scout with duality, but we already have a Scout, because we already have a Scout, if that makes sense. So we're looking purely at getting the Scout resolved on turn 1. So we're going to look at the chance of the Scout without duality, which is what we just had, plus the chance that we open duality, but not Scout, and then find Scout in the next 3 cards. So I plugged them into this equation. I said the total probability is equal to the 0.599, which we just found, plus, and then this is a quantity that I'm multiplying 3 things together, this 0.249 is the chance of opening one of your 2 copies of Pot of Duality. The 0.401 is the inverse of the chance of getting Scout, so it's the chance of not getting Scout. See how the 0.401 adds up with the 0.599 to get an even 1? That's 100% of the time you're either going to get Scout or not get Scout. And the last 0.464, I used these values, D equals 33, because there will be 33 cards left in the deck. The hand, or cards we're viewing, is 3, because the duality is going to reveal 3 cards. The K is 6, because there are still 6 Scouts left in the deck if we don't have one yet. And the X is greater than or equal to 1. I don't care if 3 Scouts come up or 3 Summoner Arts, as long as one of them is a Scout or a Summoner Art, we're good. So that ends up being 0.249 times 0.401 times 0.464, which is going to give you 0.046. Add that to the original value, and we end up with 0.645, equivalent to 64.5% of the time we're going to see a Scout with those card choices. Moving on. So we have to look at how much the duality actually helps. In Fraustro's Cliffort deck, we see that 2 duality is going to increase the chance of his turn 1 Scout by 7.7%. And I'm not looking at the actual percentage of the time, I'm looking at the percentage of the time that you get Scout with duality that you wouldn't have otherwise if you didn't have duality, which is a 7.7% increase. I did that by taking the, what was the value? The 0.046 over the 0.599. So that's going to increase your consistency by 7.7% just playing 2 duality. And interestingly, the 2 Pot of Duality gives a much better consistency than the 3 Upstart Goblin. Now both cards have downsides even though they increase consistency. Pot of Duality's downside is no special summon for the turn, obviously, and Upstart Goblin's downside is giving your opponent an extra 1,000 life points. Now the other downside of Duality that I didn't mention here but I'm thinking of now is that opening more than 1 copy of Pot of Duality is generally not good. With Cliffort's trying to explode the second turn to OTK or at least make a push, you're not going to be wanting to have that duality taking up one of the cards that could be one of your combo pieces. And this is why I can see Fraustro ran 2 Pot of Duality over 3, because running 3, while it would have greatly increased his consistency of scout, it would have also increased the percentage of the time that he's going to open more than one duality and leave himself with a dead or at least more dead hand. Upstart Goblin, you can open all 3 and it's still going to be fine. So it's going to depend on the matchups that you're playing against and the format you're playing in. If it's a much slower format, Duality can give you that advantage because you can get the cards you need quicker than your opponent. And if your opponent can't get to them quickly because it's a slow format, you're going to end up winning the game more often. The other thing to consider is the 1,000 life points, which most people consider to be nothing. There's a big idea floating around the community, and has been for a while, that life points don't really matter because most decks OTK anyway. So what does it matter if your opponent has an extra 1,000 life points? Well, I think in this format it's going to matter more than anything because of Cliffords. Because giving them 1,000 life points is one extra free search that they're going to get from their deck. If you play your Upstart Goblin turn 1 and then they play their Scout, they're still more life points than they started with, instead of dropping 1/10 of their life every time they need to search something. I feel like that could be a problem, but not enough that I'd consider Upstart Goblin to be dead because of it. And the last couple tournament results have shown that people are still playing Upstart. So the questions to ask yourself when you're thinking about making your deck and playing Pot of Duality and Upstart Goblin to get to your combo pieces faster. Number 1, do I need to special summon every turn? If you do, if you're playing a deck where every single turn you're going to be special summoning, for instance, Dragon Roars, then Pot of Duality probably won't help you very much, because every time you draw it mid to late game, it's going to be dead card, when you would rather have another Dragon or a Vanity's Emptiness or something that would help you out there. And then the next question I would ask would be, do I need to special summon my first turn, or does my deck require a lot of setup? I used Fire Fist as an example in my last video, and I would say that is a deck that requires setup. It needs to get to its Tenki so it can start the chain going of Tenki search Bear, get another Tenki, or Tenki search Gorilla, get another Tenki if you're doing it that way. So finding that Tenki would be important, and the Fire Fist deck doesn't really need to special summon that much at all, so I would say that Duality has much more value in the Fire Fist deck than does Upstart. However, in a deck like Six Samurai that needs to put out its lockdown monster in the first turn if it's going to have a chance, you're going to be wanting to play Upstart because you will see the more cards, you're still going to increase your consistency, but you need to be able to put the Synchro out. That might seem a little obvious, but mathematics back it up. The next question I would ask would be, do I run a lot of one-ofs? Decks that do run a lot of one-ofs will need to use them to win more often than not, and both Pot of Duality and Upstart help, but Upstart drawing a random card from the top of your deck is not going to help as much as Pot of Duality letting you see the top 3 cards. It's all about seeing the more cards. That's what makes Pot of Duality in some cases much more valuable than Upstart Goblin. And the last thing I want to mention that a lot of people don't really seem to notice all the time, can your deck effectively use floodgates? The decks that can effectively use cards like Macrocosmos, Dimensional Fissure, Mistake, Goes and Match, any number of those floodgates that just don't let your opponent play, usually are slower paced decks, because most of the faster paced decks will be the ones that use the graveyard a lot, or search everything like Nekloth. I'm going to talk about them soon. But if your deck has the ability to use floodgates that will hurt the meta, Pot of Duality, I would say, is almost a must, regardless of what the deck is. If you're playing floodgates in your main deck, by definition, you're pretty much anti-meta, because you believe that whatever your deck is going to do is unaffected by whatever their deck is going to do, but the cards you can bring in, like Macrocosmos, that won't hurt you, will really hurt them. The faster you can get to a card like that, especially now that Macro and DeFi are limited, it's just going to really help you win the game if you can use Duality to find them quicker. What floodgates do inherently is put a clock on your opponent to destroy the floodgate or lose the game. And if you can put a clock like that on, let's just say it's even better than Final Countdown in waiting your opponent out. So that's all I got for this video. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to check out my channel. I'll put a link there, and there's another link in an annotation or in the description. Check out the other videos in the series. There's going to be a lot more coming. I have a lot more to talk about. I haven't really had a chance to post for about 2 weeks now though because of finals. But we're done there, so hopefully I'll be posting some more stuff later. I have a bunch of cool ideas for you guys. Hit me up on Twitter at Upstart Goblin. Be sure to thumbs up the video, subscribe to my channel, and give it a favorite. Thanks guys, see you later.